Hello, Jessica Frost Ballas here with a video for lawnfawn. Today I'm using products from the newest release to create an interactive pull and slide surprise graduation card, so let's get started. First, I've traced the outline of the two large dies from the pull and slide surprise die set onto white cardstock. I traced the piece with the wide border twice and the tabbed piece once. On one of the wide border tracings, I also traced the inside. The trace lines just give me a reference guide for my stamping. Then I place the panels on my stamping platform and stamp images from Out of This World onto the panels with Copic-friendly jetback ink. Once I stamp all the images, I partially erase the pencil lines so they're much fainter. I'll be ink blending over the panels and want to make sure that I don't have any pencil smudges. Then I temporarily forgot the next step of my card and started ink blending too soon. Thankfully, I realized before I got too far. The next step before ink blending is to place masks on all of my stamped images. I stamped all the images onto masking paper and fussy cut them before placing them over the planets and spaceship. Then I use a block to stamp more stars and cover each one of those with a mask as well. The end result was worth it, but fussy cutting and masking was quite a tedious process, and I'd recommend using liquid masking fluid, especially for the stars if you have it. Once I cover all the images with masks, I blend distress inks over the panel. The two side-by-side panels will actually sit on top of each other, and I wanted the ink transitions to match, so I blended them at the same time. I used distress inks in Salty Ocean, Blueprint Sketch, and Chip Sapphire. On the third panel, I blend Chip Sapphire and Black Soot Distress Ink. Once I'm happy with my blending, I dry the panels with my heat gun. Next, I splatter the panels with water and shimmer spray and blot off the excess before drying the panels once more. When the panels are totally dry, it's time to remove my masks. I usually start by removing one of the smallest masks, as that will let me know if the masking paper is dry enough to work with. If the paper is still wet, it's more likely to tear. Once I know that it's dry, I remove all the masks to reveal my stamp images. I prefer to mask ink blend and then Copic color, just in case something goes wrong with my ink blending or I tear a mask. It's much easier and faster for me to ink blend than it is to color the images. And now it's time to color. The masks, especially those tiny stars, aren't perfect, so I use Copic markers to carefully fill in any of the gaps around the stamped images. I use markers B28, 29, 39, and 100 to match the distress inks. This took quite a while, so I'm going to speed up my coloring. You should be able to see the caps of my markers for color references, but feel free to leave a comment and ask if you have any questions. I use Copic markers to color all the images on my ink blended panels. Off camera, I stamped images from Simply Celebrate Graduation, Simply Celebrate Hangouts, Out of This World, and Beam Me Up. After coloring the blended panels, I color the rest of my images for my card. I decided to add the mice and cheese as a little joke about the moon being made of cheese. I figured they'd complement my space scene nicely. Once I finished coloring all of the images, I die cut them with the coordinating dies. And now it's time to start putting my card together. First, I die cut my blended panels using the large dies from Pull and Slide Surprise. I can just barely see some of my pencil lines, and they help me line up the dies. For the rocket ship panel, I simply trim that down to 3.5 by 4 3/4. And here are my 3 panels. To start creating my Pull and Slide Surprise mechanism, I turn over the panel with a wide border. The die set includes a die to cut little stabilizer pieces, but I use strips of foam tape so that I can have a little height on my card. I add a strip of foam tape along the right and left sides of the wide border panel. Then I take that panel and flip it over. The inside section has 3 score lines embossed into the panel from the die, and I fold and crease those score lines. The center score line folds up like a mountain fold, and I place a scrap of white paper over the panel before creasing. This just ensures that I won't smear any distress ink. Then I fold the other 2 score lines the opposite direction like a valley fold and crease those as well. Then I turn the panel back over and add a strip of 1/4-inch tape to the bottom of the panel along the small scored section. I remove the adhesive backing for that piece, but leave the backing on my 2 foam strips for the moment. The scored panel has a notch at the top, and you can see how the tab of the tabbed panel fits nicely between the notch. I carefully line that up and then press down flat to adhere the tape to the tabbed panel. Now when I pull up on the tabbed piece, you can start to see how the mechanism will work. Next, I add a little more foam tape to the bottom of the notched panel and then remove all of the adhesive backing. I carefully line up the last blended panel and adhere it behind the stitched panels. Now when you pull on the tab, it reveals the 3rd panel. And now it's time to decorate. I start by die cutting the giant You Did It from Gold Sparkle cardstock. I adhere it to the tabbed panel and trim off the overhang. If I left the overhang, the panel wouldn't be able to slide in. Next, I add a little foam tape to the very bottom and side borders of the top panel. I adhere the mice to their cheese moon and then adhere them to the foam mounting tape. This gives the bottom of my card a nice finished look and gives you a hint to the occasion for the card. Then I add a little adhesive to the bottom only of my astronaut and adhere him to the moving panel. Since he's not adhered on top, he pops up when you pull the tab. I also adhere a small strip of acetate to a planet and adhere the bottom of the planet to the moving panel. At the top of the strip, I add a little dot of glue and one more tiny planet. When you pull the tab now, you have that astronaut and 2 planets that pop up. I almost forgot, but I also die cut the little handle piece with the arrow from the Pull and Slide Surprise die set and fold it along the middle score line. I add adhesive inside and then adhere it around the top of my tab to create a little handle that also tells the recipient what to do. Then I add adhesive to the back of the mechanism and adhere everything to an A2 white card base. Just for fun, I also add the little planet and alien inside the card to continue my theme. Finally, I go back and restamp my sentiment onto white cardstock and trim it down to thin strips that I adhere to my moving panel. The dark ink on the blended panel was just a little too dark to stand out. And here's my finished card. I love all the hidden bits that are only revealed when you pull the tab. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, I'd love for you to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment. Be sure to subscribe to the lawnfawn channel for even more crafty inspiration. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, have a fantastic day and happy crafting. Bye!